So thanks for joining the Center for Art in Wood this evening. It's so fun to see so many faces that I haven't seen in such a long time. It's really cool. And as we lament the postponed, hopefully postponed start to the baseball season, we have an artist in our midst who can help us celebrate what we're missing. So I'm just going to say one thing about housekeeping, and that's that I'm going to ask that you mute. If you're not already muted, that your square is muted until we get to the end, and then we'll open it up for questions. And I think Katie and I will start out by moderating the questions through the chat. So if you type your question in, we'll start that way, and then after that we'll open it up to our post ninth inning happy hour. So I'm going to introduce Mark. For those of you who don't already know, Mark Sfirri is a sculpture artist based in nearby New Hope, Pennsylvania. Mark received his BFA and his MFA in furniture design at Rhode Island School of Design. He works mostly in wood and incorporates lathe term forms, often on multiple axes, in his work. He's lectured and demonstrated his techniques throughout North America and throughout Europe, as well as in Australia and New Zealand. His work is included in the permanent collections of 28 public institutions, including the Center for Art in Wood. Mark is Professor Emeritus at the nearby Bucks County Community College, where he ran the fine woodworking program from 1981 to 2017. Many students mentored through their time there. He has received 2 national awards, the Distinguished Educator Award in 2010 from the Renwick Alliance, and in 2012, the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Collectors of Wood Art. Mark is also a researcher and advocate for the legacies of Morton Escherich, Emil Milan, and others whose pioneering and inspiring work in wood informs our present and comprises the foundations upon which contemporary woodworkers and sculptors stand today. And his work is also, I think, extremely fun, technically rigorous, and I'm so excited that he's going to be here today as we look forward to the delayed advent of the season. It's my pleasure to introduce Mark Sfirri. Take it away, Mark.
Thank you. I'm gonna put this, I have to do one thing here real quick. There, I think we're set. Thank you, Nava, and thank you all for attending. I'd especially like to thank Katie Sorensen for help facilitating this talk. I've never done a Zoom talk before, and it's just, you know, I'm used to doing things the way that I've done them a long time, and this is new to me too. And it's great to give a talk on baseball. I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and I participated in a lot of different sports growing up: baseball, basketball, football, tennis, track, golf, and later cycling. But with baseball and football, I had the added advantage of being able to see them live, and these things added to my experiences immensely. Both the Phillies and the Eagles were pretty bad teams in the 60s, but that did not deter my interest. This was my favorite player from that time, Johnny Callison. He was an outfielder, slugger for the Phillies. And this was when I was 9 years old. And, you know, for me, I don't know if it's for everybody, but for me, there's a certain part of me that's always that age. You know, I'm either 67 and a half or I'm 9. So it's kind of a quirky thing. This is a picture of Connie Mack Stadium, which was located in 21st and West Lehigh Avenue in North Philly. And like any kid, I was impressed with the pageantry and other aspects of the game other than the game, just being there. And the vendors in particular were some people that I have fond memories about. In fact, I think I remember more about the vendors than I do about what was happening on the baseball field. there was one beer vendor who would come and you'd hear him kind of faintly in the distance going, beer here, beer here, beer here. And then there would be a pause because somebody was buying a beer, and then he had to keep moving. And then there would be beer here, beer here. So that would sort of go on. But my favorite was, I was sitting over here on the third base side, and somebody way back in here came out and they said, give your tongue a sleigh ride, give your tongue a sleigh ride. And I thought, oh my gosh. And I was just visualizing my tongue, it's just thing. And I can remember more about that instance and that person than I do about any of the plays that were happening in the games. And in the late, I guess it was 69 when Connie Mack Stadium closed, and then they opened up Vet Stadium, which was twice as big. It went from a capacity of 33,000 up to 65,000, doubling because they were using it for football and for baseball. About 20 years ago, I came up with an idea for a children's book, which I was calling The Life and Times of Pickle Man. And this is Pickle Man as a baby on the left and dancing on the right. And Pickle Man also made a presence as a baseball player. So here he is standing at the plate, kind of waving the bat a little bit. I never wrote the story, I just drew the pictures for it, never really followed up with that. And as a woodworker, especially as a turner, I wondered how I might be able to incorporate sports and woodwork, sports and the woodwork. And I couldn't really come up with anything for a long time. This picture shows, the particular features of a bat, how long it can be, what the maximum diameter is. And there were aspects about it that I found quite appealing, especially after making one, which was, it's all about function. The head end of the bat is very big, so it has a better chance of hitting a ball. And the handle's small so that it lightens up the weight and it's easier to grip. And then there's a knob at the end, which keeps the bat from flying out of your hand. And our son, Sam, who's now in his 33, I might get that right, yeah, 33. When he was little, he would watch something on TV long enough to get the gist of it, and then he would want to act it out. And so in '93, when he was 6 years old, he came running out to my shop and asked me to turn him a bat that was hollowed out at the end, like this bat on the right. Well, it's the same bat in both, but just sort of recessed there. And he said, "Can you make me a bat that's hollowed at the end?" And I said, well, that I was busy. And then his request turned into a demand when he said, "You have a lathe, you have the wood, make me a bat." And so I did, and this was the bat that resulted, and he was happy. He went off with it. He later did the drawing of the cobra on there, which I wood burned in for him. And it started getting me thinking about the baseball bat form, again, from the aspect of sort of as a blank canvas. And at the time, in the early 90s, I was playing around with these multi-axis turning details. And I was thinking that maybe I could incorporate them into it. And the one on the left, the illusion there is that a baseball hit the bat and it deflected out of shape. And the one on the right, the ball is actually passing through it. And, there's certainly intended humor in these things, but I had to think it through on the geometry side. Like, how do you do that? How can I make that happen? The one thing about turning is it's so precise. It's the radial results is when you spin something around an axis, it's going to be uniform throughout, and it's a mirror image, a radial symmetry or bilateral symmetry. And that kind of thing didn't really interest me much. I was interested in exploring turning a little bit to get some different kinds of results, and this seemed to be a perfect way to do it. Just as a general thing, I try not to let the geometry take over too soon. I'd rather just be looking at, have a concept in my head and try to do it. And because I find that if I let engineering take over, it limits my creativity. So I want to push creativity as far as I can before I turn to the geometry side of it or the engineering side of it. So to give you an idea, you know, these bats, you get what I said here. There looks like the ball hit the bat and it deflected a little bit, but these are the kinds of drawings that I need to do at some point so that I can remember how I did it. You know, if you turn something straight on the lathe, you can you could reproduce that, or you know, with some skills, you should be able to reproduce it. If you try to reproduce something like this and the centers aren't precisely the same given the length, you cannot make the same thing again, or you know, it'll be a variation of it. So I try to capture it at some point. These are fairly detailed drawings of sort of miniature bats, but you know, it gets across sort of the illusion of what's, or what needs to be considered in order to do it. So here we have an axis running right down the middle of the bat, which is used for turning most of it, including the bump on the outside. And then there's an axis toward the back, or here, this is a blown up version of it, that swings the bat way off center, and that's just to make this cove shape on this side. And I want to explain one other thing about it is, you notice that the width of the bat here is a certain amount, and then there's a gap here. Well, that's to allow for the bump. So here is that dimension of this part of the bat, and this part is the bump. So you're actually looking down the end of the bat, and you can see the bump bulge out. It doesn't have to go all the way around because it's countered by the cove that's on this side. I don't know if that makes any sense. This one is straight, except for the ball. And then the ball, I sort of guessed at where I should have the axis in order for me to do that. But I realized that all I have to do is draw the ball wherever I wanted it to be, this way and left and right, and then put a mark in the center, and the axis just has to pass through that, and wherever it ends up, it ends up. So it's not really a guessing game. And there's a lot of learning that goes on. I figure things out, and I always keep samples in my shop so that I might use a piece of, you know, a section that becomes part of a larger working vocabulary of form. These were the first bats that I made. I made 2 sets of 5 and a set of 2 for an exhibition in '93 called the Mark and Mikey Show that was in Washington, D.C. And, you know, I called the series Rejects from the Bat Factory. And, you know, with a couple of ideas of how to explain it, like this would be the result of using wood that was under-tempered, which has nothing to do with wood, it has to do with metal. But, you know, the fact that a ball could hit it and make it, you know, make it push through like that. It's not going to happen with wood. Or this one that's over-tempered, so it got hit and it actually shifted it off center. And I was also interested with the notion of how sometimes we assess no value to a reject, and sometimes we assign tremendous value. And a couple of examples, this would be of the no value. It doesn't matter how much you would have spent for this hammer. If you hit it day one, 6 months in, a year later, and this happened, you're going to be pretty annoyed and you're going to want your money back. So, you know, that's an example of no value. As opposed to this one, which has tremendous value. I also enjoyed collecting stamps when I was little. And this, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but this is called the inverted Jenny. Jenny is the type of aircraft that it was. And this was a stamp from 1918. And it was sort of, I guess, early airmail. Stamps at that time were only, I think, 2 cents. And this was 24 cents to get a letter flown from Philadelphia to New York or DC. It was very limited in where they were going to go. And you notice it's 2 colors. And so in this case, they flipped at the printing, and when they were printing them, one sheet went in upside down and printed the plane upside down. So the person that bought this sheet spent $2.40. It was 100 stamps. And he knew that this was a freak. And then he asked, oh, can I see another sheet? And none of the other sheets had it. So he knew that maybe it was the only one, and it turned out to be the only one. He ended up selling it a couple months later for $15,000. Again, this is in 1918. It was a tremendous amount of money. And then it goes on, and the ownership and how it passed through history. All of this is part of some postal collector's record. And the most that was ever spent for one of these stamps was $1.5 million about 10 years ago, I think it was, or 15 years ago. And there is one available now that's $500,000, but it has the hinge on the back. I don't know if, again, if you collected stamps, but they used to sell these little hinges that you lick the back of the stamp, which is the worst thing you can do, and put it on the back and then lick the other half and stick it into the album. But anyway, I thought that that was, it allowed me to talk about stamps during my talk here. Irv Lipton was a big collector in California, and he pushed a lot of turners in trying out new things, and he certainly did with me. My first bats were made out of ash, and you know, they were all kind of usable length, and they had logos burned into them. And he said, "Oh, I want one on all out of exotic woods." And I thought to myself, well, I don't have pink ivory that's 3 by 3 by 30 inches long. And I thought I could adapt by making them of different lengths. And this was the set that he bought. And after he passed away, this was donated to the Museum of Art and Design, which is a tremendous honor for me. Babinga, pink ivory, and wenge. And through the years, I've made different groupings of bats, depending on what I had available, and you know, tried to mix up. I introduce new designs from time to time. I thought it's interesting too, you know, I'll mention this, that in '93, when I first made the first bats, was the year that the players went on strike. I think it was that they went on strike, and it was about money. Sound familiar? And I vowed never to go to a baseball game after that, and I never have, to a professional game. I've gone to some minor league games, and I just thought that they were, you know, that it was crazy that they were doing this. Here's a dance partner I have.
Wait till we make a documentary about you.
That was Harry Carey. Thanks, Katie. And this was Barbara Sarator doing the video for this. This project was one, it was a demo for class. This is at Bucks County Community College. And I took green ash, 6-foot long piece, and turned it, which is pretty challenging to turn ash green and to try to get the handle small, because it just wants to bounce. I mean, the reason ash is used is because it's so flexible, and you know, it whips the ball when you hit it. And, but also when you try to turn it, it wants to bounce like crazy too. And then afterwards I steam bent it, and to show steam bending, made a jig for it. And now I take it dancing. I always have a partner. Oops, we'll go on to the next one. I don't remember the year of this. I think it was in the mid-90s. There was an exhibition at the Louisville Slugger Museum. And I've come to learn that Louisville, it's Louisville Slugger Museum. And they had, they were gonna have an exhibition, and I don't remember the title for it either, but I entered or instigated these two collaborative pieces. The one on the left, in the upper left, that's Michael Broly making his baseball bat. And this one is David Sengel. And I turned it for him, and then he glued rose thorns on it, right on the handle part of it, which was pretty funny. And I made this one. This is Michael Hoslick and me, and he's turned it as with like a propeller, and then to get this part, and then the straight part of the bat. Clay Foster and Jean-Francois Escalin. And then the museum bought the bats, which I thought was really, really cool. And in 2006, so Hillerick and Bradsby make the Louisville Slugger in Louisville, and John Hillerick IV, so it's his great grandfather who started the company in the 1800s, 1880s, or something like that, was president. And I just thought, well, the AAW is going to be there. That they had some of my bats, and I sent him a letter asking if we could meet. And so he sent me this letter back, which meant a lot to me because, you know, it's John Hillerick, the president and CEO of Hillerick and Bradsby. And that he would be, you know, when we get closer to the date, we could meet and, you know, talk baseball or talk about the bats or whatever. So I was really, really thrilled about it. And if you're not familiar, this is the Louisville Slugger Museum. Actually the museum, I think the museum's on this side. This is corporate offices. But here is this giant bat. It's 120 feet tall. And it weighs 68,000 pounds. It's actually made out of steel. And the wood grain and everything about it's been painted on it. And I thought, well, I do rejects from the Bat Factory. And what is the Bat Factory? That's Hillerick and Bradsby. So maybe I should do proposals that didn't make it, you know, rejected proposals. Instead of doing this design, you know, what else could have been proposed? So I did a whole series of these bats, and they're in the same kind of format. They're about the same, they are the same size with the border. And then this is that building, and, you know, this is double twist. And, you know, I just got going. I don't, well, this is number 18. So I made at least 18 of them, different designs. And I just really had fun with them. I didn't really have a plan. And here's another tightrope walk. I didn't really have a plan for them, but I just really got into that creative thing, doing these watercolors. And they're not very large. I guess they're about 5-inch by 5-inch, something like that, the Harvest. And this is actually the first one that I did. And so I was going to meet him, and it's 2 days before me going, before that meeting. And I just thought, maybe I'll pique his interest by sending him an image of this one. So I emailed it to him. And then within hours, the meeting was canceled. And so I was like, oh, this is terrible. But on the other hand, I was going to bring all these pictures with me to show him. And maybe it's better that it happened this way. So he canceled it, but I did get a tour from his secretary of the facility. And then at the very end, I said, you know, what happened? And she said, she paused for a moment. Remember this, she's talking about her boss now. And she said, he's an odd fellow. And that was it. So that settled that. There have been many other permutations of the bats. This was a set of mini bats that I did that the longest one I think is about 7 inches. And I was just trying out different ideas. This one's sort of like a balloon that's deflated, and this is like a piece of sausage that you cut into, and it kind of, you know, opens up like that. Splitter here, and it's just kind of a fun one. And these, another one, they're getting a little bit, you know, more off the mark of being a baseball bat, obviously. A little bit more cartoony. These are not multi-axis turnings, they're just straight turnings that I had this idea. I wanted this one to look like it was kind of bending back and forth. So to make it, it actually was bulging on both sides, and then I carved it away to try to create this illusion. Same thing with this aorta, where this goes right around it, but then I shape it there. So the 3 organics. And I made these knotted bats. So I did some that were individual and a little bit more cartoony. This is about 2 feet long, shorter than a regular bat, but 4 inches in diameter at the bottom. And I also found that a knot is a very tricky thing to carve. You know, it's simple enough. Everybody in their head, you can think of how a knot is made. You've made them before. Usually take a piece of wood and carve it. It's seems extremely complicated. And I know from my experience, the first time if I'm doing a couple, the first one I do, it takes forever. And you think, oh, it's not getting anywhere. And then all of a sudden it starts to look like a nut. And then it becomes clear what it has to look like. What I did, my mock-up for that, was to actually take this cord that's maybe 1/4 of an inch in diameter and tied a knot. And then I use it as reference because what's happening on one face is totally different than on the second, then the third, then the fourth. But it all has to sort of blend together. And so every time I do a knotted bat, I get this thing out. So I have my drawing, my 3-dimensional drawing. There's one that's painted. And this is 25th anniversary, 2018. I made a couple of sets. And, you know, you notice this compared to the 93 set, the bats are a lot closer together. I thought that looked a lot better. And there are these logos that I would burn onto them that are just sort of silly phrases. And then I torch it a little bit to darken the grain, finish it. And then the upper part, the handles of the bat have nothing on them because as a regular bat has nothing on it. And so that's for the pine tar. I haven't done it, but I probably should make some that are, you know, have the pine tar kind of smeared in on them. And I want to mention this one. This is my squiggle handle here. That's going to come up in a little bit. I want to show you how I adapted that form into something else. And this set in holly was, I had this really nice holly, and holly is very, very white. It can be. It doesn't. Sometimes it changes color, but it's very white and it's virtually grainless. So it has, to me, the look of bone, you know, and I really like that about it. So this set has no finish on it to maintain that. Even putting wax on it tends to yellow it a little bit. So I wanted to keep it with that kind of bone-like quality. But most people would hang these sets on a wall, and generally people's walls are white, so this would be kind of lost. So I decided to take control of the background, you know, so it doesn't matter what kind of wall it goes on. The bats will be seen in context of this contrast between the smooth white bone kind of look and the textured, what I call a slate finish. This is my inchworm bat. And, you know, when I show this to turners, and I know there's a number of turners in the group here, you know, it's a real head scratcher because in order to turn a piece of wood, you have to have a center here and then you have another center over here. But if you turn that, you would lose the center you needed to turn this. You get it? So how do you do that? Well, the important thing is I know how to do it. So that's all that's really important there. No, I'll explain it. So it's a little trickier than this, but I'll just say basically how it's done, which is there is a center here. And then I drew a line on a piece of paper. I drew it flat first, and then I extended that, extended that line. And then right at this point, I drew a flat so that I could put it on a center between here and here. And then the same thing here, I put a line that went down this way. So this piece of wood was wider by this much. So I had a place to put it there and a place to put it there. And then I could turn those parts. I could switch it back and forth, no fancy chucks or anything like that. And then in the end, just trim that part of it off and then do the carving on this part of it. This is a freestanding one, stubbed. So that's Clara walnut, and it's got a base. You know, home plate, I know the shape of it. I think everybody knows the shape of it. But to get it right, I was just guessing, and it just wasn't right. So I had to drive to a baseball field so I could measure what the proportions were so I could get that part of it right. And this one's up on a base and bent but not broken. So this is I can't remember the wood. I think it's poplar or maple. And then I wood burned it, and then I painted it black, and then wiped the white paint to make that part of it come out. Nubby, This bat is, you can see the shape of the bat. It just comes down, there's, the knob and so on. But it's got these quirky little things on it, what I call a soft bead. So this is turned right around the whole thing in a few spots. And then I try to erase it or carve it away in a way that none of them line up. So it's not too organized, so it looks more natural. And there's a fair amount of carving to smooth this out and to have it all kind of blend with one another. My latest bat was for the AAW. They're having an exhibition called Batter Up, and I decided to try something new. And this is in holly, and it's a twisted bat, so it's kind of twisted and bent a little bit. So a little bit of carving in this part of it. And they're having these are in a catalog that's it's being some of them are auctioned. I don't think this is part of an auction though, in July. My other an aspect of baseball that I've gotten involved with involves baseballs themselves. And interestingly, the way this started, Michael Hoslick turned these balls and burned in the stitches of them. But before that, he had come here for a visit, and I had actual baseballs that I have one with Sam Maloof's autograph on it. I have one with Bob Stocksdale and a bunch of Turners on it. And he thought, oh, that would be a good idea. So he started making the balls. So, and on occasion, I'll do the logos. So these are both from 2006, the Furniture Society in Philadelphia. So there's a soft pretzel, and here's Atlanta, the 30th anniversary with a peach on it. And another one that I did was for Judy McKee when she got her Lifetime Award. And this was for the conference in San Francisco. So I started to talk about this a little bit before, but I've done bats that look like they're bent, and so thinking about I could use geometry of that to do other kinds of forms, and I did this, which is a bowling pin, but by not having it radially symmetrical, by bending these things into one another, plus changing the heights of them, I could create this kind of animation with them. And this was a piece that I called Madonna and Child. Made a couple of those. And for the most recent AAW Nature Nurture exhibition, I made this, which is a variation of that. So they're more like sticks or branches. And they kind of look like bears to me. These are the legs, and this is the nose and the arms. And again, playing with the height. And it's also called Madonna and Child. The one thing about the pop themed shows is there's a maximum of 6 inches, 6-inch cube they have to fit inside. So that's a piece I did for this year's. So I mentioned the squiggle thing before, and that's a detail. This is a detail that is purely turned. There is no carving. It's just a straight turning. And I had, there's a fair amount of cleanup, don't get me wrong. The tool's not gonna leave it that pristine. But the form itself is a turned object, turned on 2 different sets of centers. And one day I was thinking about what could I do with that? And I thought, what if I had made it curvy on one side and smooth on the other? And when I looked at my drawing, my sketch that I did, it looked like a handle to me. But when I actually did it, this is the thing I did, and it looked like a figure. Then all of a sudden, that year, 1997, I was making figures. I wasn't planning on it, these abstracted figures. The first ones were symmetrical, like they're standing at attention. And this is a drawing of front view, side view, top view. These are all the centers, and it gets pretty involved. In the end, it's about 6 centers, but 6 sets of centers. But it's not my goal to use as many centers as I can. In fact, normally 2 sets is plenty. It gets across that graphic thing. But in this case, I'm trying to do one thing with the front of the body, a different thing on the back, and then of course the head that's turned at right angles. As I started doing these more and more, they started growing taller and taller. And This one's 6 foot tall. This is 4 foot tall. This one is made out of ash, so that's about 5.5 feet. And here's a in-process shot of that, which I think is pretty telling. So this is a tailstock, and forget the faceplate, that's just a counterbalance, but the axis line is down here somewhere because I was trying to make the shoulders wider, as wide as I could. So the further I can get my centers away, the flatter the sort of football shape became, and I could make it wider and wider. So that's kind of what it looked like. And I'm really glad I took this picture because this is what I was standing in front of when I was turning, you know, and you see it as this ghost image, and that's pretty scary or whatever. But, you know, I'm very careful about what I do, and I'm, you know, line up my faceplate and line up my tool rest exactly where it needs to be. But what happens is I'm cutting, once it's round dead across the back, I cut about 12 inches, and then there's about 3 feet of airspace, and then 12 inches, and then 3 feet of airspace. So, you know, it's a very, you have to learn how to hold the tool, bevel touching, not bevel rubbing. My background really is in furniture to begin with, and woodworking, and these are some tables. This is a side table, Babinga top with a painted base, multi-axis turn. And when I did these, the first one I did, I wanted it to look like, I didn't want them all to be the same. I wanted one to bend one way, one to bend another way. And the first one I did, I actually changed each design of each leg. But then I came to realize that I could make them all the same and just rotate them 90 degrees, and it would change the whole thing to, if that makes any sense to you. Another one, side table. Fleur Bressler commissioned this folding screen. It's about 7 feet high. No turning, it's carving and painting. I collaborated with a painter named Robert Dodge back in the late 80s. And we did a bunch of screens together, and she wanted one. And so I said, well, he's in Germany. I want to paint this thing. So, and then, while I do sketch, I find that 3-dimensional sketches work the best. So this is just a tiny little 2-inch high turning and carving that I'm trying to come up with ideas. And I can knock out a bunch of these at once. And then I look at them and throw away all the bad ones. You know, no sense spending all the countless hours it is to make something bigger that's of a form that you don't like. So, you know, doing these little models are very helpful. And this is a finished one that I did, not of that design, but it's about, it's a stool, so it's about 16 inches tall. This is that kind of evolved into this, if I can get this to work here, which is kind of just a variation of it with different kind of carving and getting away from symmetry altogether. That's about 6 foot tall and about 1 foot in diameter. So, but one of the things I really like about it is that this is something that the turner sees, but you don't see it in the finished product. So I'm working on trying to make it be part of the experience and not just be the static form. I mean, not that the static form doesn't work, oops. But and here is one of my few food furniture pieces that I made in France in 1999. They seem to have this abundance of bread, baguettes in particular, because they'd always have fresh baguettes, which meant that they always had leftover stale ones. And I decided to do my first French country furniture piece one there. And I had to commission the top, which I thought was it was a fun thing to do, working with a bakery to make that. And also out of the French experience, I decided that I really enjoyed going to the grocery store to find products that I had no idea what it was, but just interesting labels. And I came back and started doing my vessels. You know, vessels are sort of sacred to turners. That's what they do. Not me, but you know, I don't know. I'm a furniture maker to the turners and a turner to the furniture makers. But the reality is the forms of these, you notice how they're listing a little bit and they're curved in the front and they're actually coved in the back. This form relates very much to the figure, and it relates very much to the baseball bats as well. Game hunting in North America. This one I did at a collaborative workshop I did with Michael Hoslick a couple years ago. Cracker Jacks, which I was going to get a box for today, but I didn't. But unfortunately, they don't come with the prizes anymore, and I find that really upsetting. But it's a sign of the times. That's it. Thank you. Now I'm going to stop this, and I'm back to here. Right? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, good. Okay. So that's all you need to know about baseball.
Thanks, Mark. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Thank you for the illumination into your work. And
Sure.
Please feel free, everyone, to submit your questions in the chat area. And we do have a question already, right out of the gate. So Anthony Fortner is asking about the one spinning on the lathe may be displayed on a turntable. Anthony, can you clarify your question? Maybe.
I think I was just in response.
One more time.
I think I was just in response to how fun it looked as it was spinning on the lathe, that we might display it like that on a super slow turntable device. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. A slow one, you know, but it is interesting how, you know, like when I'm doing the figures, it's like it's a skater pirouetting. And you just don't see that, you know, when in the finished thing. The maker does, but beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
I thought the note that you ended on, your turner to furniture makers and a furniture to the turners really does represent the kind of two worlds that you occupy.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I was thinking about, especially one of the last works you showed, which was that 7 foot tall single turned piece. That's, I believe, at Bucks Count. It's at Bucks.
Oh, that one is that's 10 foot, and that was not that one. It was that one was symmetrical. Had a bunch of elements that repeated one way and the other way. This one's a little, you know, much more quirky.
Well, so I was thinking about, you know, your dedication to kind of pushing the form, especially as a furniture maker. Yeah. Usually in foundational furniture making, you're meant to, you know, adhere to values of symmetry and function and straightforward. You think of it as like you know, things are done at right angles, and you're meant to think about stability and use. And it seems like everything that you've done in your career has been about pushing the form and imbalancing it and creating tension between a sense of balance and stability.
Right. Well, you're right. I mean, there's two elements that go into making, like from the beginning, you know, as a student or as an apprentice or whatever, is the design part of it. And then there's the making part of it. So you have the technical skill to make something, and then you have the idea, right? So at the beginning, and my many years of teaching, I try to figure out for every student, what is their strength and where should they be helped? You know, so somebody that has skill, I try to push more on the design side, and somebody who has many great ideas but can't execute, you got to start it simple and then work your way to it. And with me, designs were always ahead of technical. And when I was going to school, I would initially do things that were nice and symmetrical and for joinery, making a dovetailed box and all that. And it's very important to do it. I remember there's one piece in particular. My first year as a student in woodworking, there was an exhibition at the Renwick called Wooden Works, and in that it had the work of Wendell Castle, Sam Maloof, Art Carpenter, and Wharton Esherick and George Nakashima. But Esherick had his corner desk in there, and everything was skewed, and it wasn't symmetrical. And I sort of saw freedom in thinking, oh, you can do anything you want, which, you know, maybe you can do a lot, but you have to take baby steps first. And when I came back, I had this idea that I talked to Fred about. We had to make a dovetailed box with a drawer in it. And I said, I want to make it so it's angled to the side on the back. And he's listening to me. And he says, okay, make one that's perfectly square first, and then you can do whatever you want to do. And then I was so challenged to make one that was perfectly square. I kind of understood, you know, baby steps first, and then, you know, and then it's a big leap to go to asymmetry, and many people aren't willing to do that, which I understand. You know, it's much safer to, and you know, my earlier work was much more symmetrical or whatever. And I also make this statement when I was teaching. I said, you know, you could have a front rail on a table that goes down at an angle and it comes back up, and put it right in the middle. And people will see that and say, that's a detail you intended, and so on. You could even mess up or say, I'm not going to make it symmetrical, and move it a ½ inch off. And most people wouldn't pick up on it. So it's still in the middle because your eyes correct it. But if you moved it like 1.25 inches, people will say, did you mean for that to be off center? Like, that it wasn't an intentional thing. So you have to make it obvious enough that that was intent, as opposed to, you know, dipping your toe into the water. And for me, it's been jumping in, you know, with both feet into the water, because that's, you know, the way I'm kind of wired. That statement about turners think I'm furniture makers and furniture makers think I'm turners, that kind of gelled with me when I was talking to Ned Cook from Yale. And he said to me, you know, you're one of those rare people that has one foot firmly in one and one in the other. And I just laughed and said that because, you know, I am considered the outsider in both groups to not many people.
You're the common ground. Okay, so we have some questions. Let's see. Oh, this is an easy one, I think. Whose jersey are you wearing? This is from Mark Lipstein. Oh, there you go. Well, then that's a declaration.
This is from the AAW, and we had to pick a player, and I picked Mickey Mantle. It's on number 7. I don't even know when this was, but it's kind of a fun one.
So today you're Team Woodturner.
Yes, yes.
I'm going to jump down to Betty has a show and tell piece, so we'll get there. But before she shows us what she has to show us, John Kempner has a question about baseball bats being made of ash, but now they're made of maple, which apparently is a more fragile wood type. Can you describe the differences between the two woods, and then what are the best woods for your work, and do you do commissions? Which I think we know because the Brustler screen is one example.
Yeah, I love doing commissions. The history of baseball bats is there are 2 woods that are ideal for the bats, and so you're looking for a quality in the wood that makes it flexible. So when you hit a ball, it actually pushes the bat back and then whips it out. So it really springs it. You know, it hits it. It goes further than if you had, you know, something that had no rigidity, or that bat would break. So the 2 woods would be ash and hickory. They would be the ideal woods for a baseball bat. And I used to teach with a guy who played semi-pro ball. And I asked him about it, and he said, well, ash bats, absolutely. But that he had a hickory bat that he used for batting practice. and never used it in the game. And I said, why? And he goes, well, the bat was a lot heavier. And so if I could hit the ball with a hickory bat, I could really hit it with an ash bat because you can swing it, it's not as heavy. So hickory is used for things like sledgehammers and axes and things like that, where weight doesn't matter. In fact, more weight is good. So ash is really the ideal. The whole reason that maple came into play was because of drugs, basically. Barry Bonds started hitting a ton of home runs using a maple bat. And as a woodworker, trained in qualities of wood, I thought that was the silliest thing to come down the pike, is to make bats out of maple, because it's not flexible, it's not bendable. And sure enough, and I remember I used to tell students that. It's like, don't make it out of maple. It's not a good wood for the bat. But because Bonds kept hitting all those home runs, it changed the whole landscape. And to a point where Hillerick and Bradsby, half their bats were maple and half were ash. And then they saw this problem that the maple bats kept breaking. So they did a $2 million study. Why is this happening? And they determined that the wood was too brittle. I would have done it for 10 grand. I would have told them that. Saved them a lot of money. So that's the reason, but ash is ideal.
Yeah, I was really transfixed by your description of the vibrations of ash. And I wonder if anyone's done any of like ultra slow motion photography that could show the impact and response.
Well, during the World Series and the, what's the one right before the championship series, they do have these super fast cameras that are zoomed in on the batter. So if they make a hit, they can show it back in super slow motion. And I remember there was one year where, oh gosh, I'm forgetting his name right now. He used to play for the Phillies, and then he went to San Francisco. Can't think of his name. Anyway, he hit the ball, but broke his bat, and it went out toward the shortstop, and the shortstop went one way because that's the way the ball should have gone, and the ball went the other way. And they showed this super slow motion. In this particular case, he hit the ball and it broke the bat into 3 pieces. Then it hit the next part of the bat, and then it hit the next part of the bat. So it got hit 3 times very quickly, but that's what put a tremendous amount of spin on it that made it curve away, and he scored 2 runs doing it. You can see this really well in hockey because it's only an inch thick, the stick. But when they do a slap shot, you can see the stick bends about 5 inches and then whips off. And I'm not sure what the wood is. It's either ash or hickory. It's probably hickory.
I have an answer for you, Mark, on who from the Phillies. Hunter Pence.
Hunter Pence, yes.
That's from David Markowitz. He's responding on Facebook Live.
Oh, good. Thank you, David.
Thank you. This is a question that Mark and you and I have talked about in the past, of course, and that is about the role of collaboration in your art. And certainly, when you think about professional sports and team activities, mm-hmm. there would be an intersection there. For me, there was this gallery in New York City that called the Gallery at Workbench. Workbench was a chain around the Northeast mostly. There was one in Michigan too, and it was kind of like an IKEA sort of, but way before that, back in the 80s. And the 2 women that were running the store in their flagship in New York City decided to have a gallery for this new wave of studio furniture makers. And it was fascinating, the different themes that they would come up with. And one time they did one on collaboration where they took a woodworker and a metal worker and teamed them up, and they all made a piece for a show. And it was a one and done thing. I mean, it's not like any of them pursued it afterwards, but I just thought, wow, what a great idea. So I started back in 85, working with Robert Dodge for about 5 or 6 years. And
where he would do the painting and I would do the making. And we had lots of commissions. It was a particularly good time as a maker in the 80s, furniture in particular. And then I decided to end that. And then I started up with Michael Hoslick, and we had some shows together. We called the Mark and Mikey Show, and had a few exhibitions like that. And then he started the whole conference idea, you know, taking it big, making, you know, people from all over the world getting together. And there are many conferences. We have one locally, Echo Lake, that we do every year, except for this year. And, you know, a lot of them have started, which is neat to see. I mean, for me, it was an interesting thing to do. And I was really into it back in the 80s. And I am still now some, but it's not as, you know, you have to want to do it, and you have to, you know, trust the person you're working with and all that. So.
Yeah.
I have a show and tell that I wanted to show. Can you all see this? It's a bat, and it has a ball in it. It's loose, but it can't come out. And this bat was made by an ITE resident, and he gave it to me, you know, because he saw the bats that I was doing. He's a French guy, Fabrice Misha, who actually is no longer with us. And so he turned this bat out of green wood with a hole. It was just, it wasn't tight. I mean, the hole, it gets bigger on the inside, but the rim of it was so that you could just push the ball in. And he was going to finish it first before putting the ball in. And then one of the other ITE residents just came and pushed the ball in, which it'll never come out again. And I thought that was a neat thing.
That's fantastic.
I'm going to give this to the center if you want it.
I will talk separately.
Yeah.
Thank you for showing us that.
Wait, one more thing.
Really fantastic.
This is
That's the David Sengel one.
yeah. This is David Sengel bat with the rose thorns on it. So, and you can hold it like this. It's okay, and they're closer together. You know, rose thorns are, when they're sporadic, that's when they really hurt. These are really tight together. But when you start to bring it down like this, it gets more painful. That's all. Okay.
That's the trick to collaborations and the success of collaborations. In many ways, it's like chess, or I could bring up another metaphor, but I won't. But where, you know, two people have to really want to do it.
Yeah.
In order for it to be successful. And then two people have to really show themselves in a work that makes sense as one single work. Mm-hmm. But when you can bring together recognizable input from both kind of creative inspirations and see them merge together, that's the real magic of it, right? It's when that happens.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the way I look at it is, for me, if one goes to art school, you're in this sort of really intense situation where you're looking around, you're seeing all these people doing it. It's a very intensive thing, and you're young, and all your time is dedicated to this. And once you leave, you don't have that. It's all yourself. You know, making art, generally speaking, is pretty much a solitary thing. And solitary thing. And
especially now, I guess.
What's that?
Especially now.
Yeah, yeah.
Of a coronavirus.
And when I started doing the collaborative stuff, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like being in art school again, because you know, and that was what the appeal was to me, was seeing how your forms get interpreted by other people, what you would do with their things. And so, yeah, I mean, I've collaborated with hundreds of people over the years, but.
I think Miriam Carpenter submitted a question. I think is probably on all of our minds right now.
Is it PG?
Yes, yes. It refers to something you mentioned really at the beginning of your talk, which is, when and how do you plan to bring to fruition a piece inspired by Give Your Tongue a Sleigh Ride?
Oh.
We want to see that piece materialize.
Okay, I'll do that. Someday.
Well, it's such a visual kind of statement.
Yeah.
But I wondered when you were saying it, if it wasn't one of those things like when you're a child and you hear a song lyric and your mind thinks it's this thing, and then you find out 20 years later it's
Right.
actually something else entirely.
Sure. Yeah, maybe someday. I collect things like that. I mean, that's how I did my whole the bottles. You know, I had to come up with product lines, so I had to kind of figure out names of things, and is it something that would come in a bottle or a jar or a can, and kind of match them up. And I don't know, it was a fun thing, which I do. You know, and I have no idea where I'm going to be going, what I'm going to be doing next. I'm working on stuff now that I had no idea that I was thinking. It wasn't even on the radar a couple of days ago, and then now I'm doing just these other things, and they're kind of fun.
It's great. Andy Buck has a question.
Uh-oh.
And it's about your drawing work and your pen and ink drawings, and also your use of color, which I think does penetrate your sculptural work quite a bit. Can you talk about the connections between drawing and painting and your woodwork?
Well, you know, coming from an art background, you do a lot of different things. And in high school too, I was doing drawings, I was doing this and that, photography, printmaking, a lot of different things. But once at RISD, I started taking a wood class, then I put all that aside, and it all became about woodworking because that needed all of my attention, and which is fine. But, you know, after about 20 years of that, it was like, well, you know, how do you make a political statement, or how is something funny if it's a piece of walnut? It's just, you know what I mean? That I just thought there had to be some way that I could bring it out somehow. So the bottles that I did actually started with Paul Sasso. Paul Sasso and I were at one of the early Furniture Society conference, and he said, "Mark, I really want to make a can of dog food." And I'm like, "Dog food? What are you talking about?" He goes, "Make me a can." So I actually made a bent can, and then he painted it, and, you know, they put it in the auction and stuff. And it's like, wow, it just transforms the whole thing of a form that can be a turning, but yet it's you know, I had metal paint for the top and bottom, and I could do different things. And then that's what got me started with that. I don't know what year that was. I think it was, I don't know when it was, early 2000s or something. Drawing, what was the question?
What are the connections, or what are the connections that made your work in because, and I think I think there's a level of care that's demonstrated through even your sketch and your sketches and diagrams that seem very deliberate, and almost especially, you know, when you were talking about the need to document the precise measurements and processes of multi-axis turning, because otherwise you can't reproduce those angles and shapes. Well, but that sketch, you know, it was very clearly not what you would typically think of a sketch as being, and it wasn't the sense of the spontaneity that sketches sometimes.
Right. Well, those were came out of I do workshops a lot. And usually when I go to do a workshop, I show up an hour early and draw. I take a pad of paper and I draw these things out every time I go. And this one series of workshops I was doing in the DC area, I had like every night it was a different place. And I just thought, I don't have time to do that. So I thought, well, I'll just draw it up as an 18 by 24, and then I have it, and then I could just bring it with me each time. So actually those drawings were 18 by 24. And I drew guidelines and everything for the lettering, but then freehanded it all, you know, and I didn't want it to be perfect. I wanted it to be a little, you know, not perfect. But it has all the information that it needs. I draw it out. I drew them out with T-square and squares and all that stuff to get it all right. But then in the end, I'm drawing it by hand, you know, to draw the shapes and stuff. The sketches I do for my concepts of ideas for turning are pretty crude. They're just, can I do this? And if I did this and this, and then what I'll do is I'll take 2 blocks of wood and lay them out the same and then try it on one. And if it's good, I have the master. If it's not good, then I have another one that I bring in. That's not answering that question, but I don't know. I like doing printmaking and the color stuff. Really, what got me back into it was Emma Lake and noise. Noise got me back into it. The early Emma Lakes had all these machines that were making so much noise 24 hours a day, and I couldn't stand it. So the last thing I wanted to be doing, even though I was turning and woodworking, was be in the wood shop. And then I walked in, here was this 2D area, painting, and there were a bunch of people, Kim Kelzer, Fabian Garcia, and Merrill, and just people that like doing that. And there was quiet music on, and I thought, oh, this is good. So that's when I got back into it. And you know, having a few helpful hints from people at the times that I needed them about what would be a bad choice or what would be a good choice of a color for this or that. And that kind of got me started back into it. I've never really taken formal classes in painting or drawing. The color ones are watercolor pencils. So I draw it out with pencil, and then I use the watercolor pencils and blend them.
Great, thanks. I'm just gonna, let's see, we have, I think you still teach workshops, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's something that everybody can take advantage of at some point or another. And I did want to, for those of you who don't know, Emma Lake is a collaborative event that happens once every 2 years, correct? In Saskatchewan, in a remote location, and where it's a gathering of artists from different disciplines for a period of a week. Is that right?
About a week, yeah.
2 weeks? Okay. It's a pretty wonderful thing. And then Echo Lake.
Yeah, Echo Lake is local.
Annually. It's also a collaborative event that takes place at Bucks County Community College. It should have taken place right now.
Right.
But because we're in a pandemic, of course, it was deferred like everything. So, you know, happy that you could be here today with us to celebrate in lieu of that.
Yeah.
There are a couple more questions. I did want to make sure that we could see the bat that Betty Scarpino wanted to show us. And then there are a couple more questions, but I think what we'll do is move into the happy hour portion of the evening, and everybody can unmute themselves and just like have a conversation. So if your question didn't get answered, feel free to throw it out there.
Maybe we should start with Betty.
Let's do it. Hi, Betty.
Remember that one, Mark?
Wait a minute, I can't see where you are.
Turn to gallery. Go up into where it says speaker view.
Oh, yeah, gallery view.
Yep.
Now, where is?
So if Betty starts.
Oh, there you are. Yeah. Of course I remember. Sam and Dan's Slugger. Yeah. That's a good one.
It is a good bat.
Congratulations, by the way, Betty,
Oh, thank you.
on your Lifetime
thank
Achievement Award.
So Mark does do commissions.
I do.
Yes, I've done several commissions with Mark.
Yes.
Yes. They're fun.
Of course they are.
So I know, Carolyn, you had a question. You were asking Mark to talk about some of the things that he's working on now that he never conceived of doing.
Yeah, that piqued my interest.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, I really don't know. I work on a project until I get it done, and I don't really start thinking about what I'm going to do next because it's kind of what way's the wind blowing and what I'm going to be doing. You know, I might pick up something I started a couple years ago and finish it, or just, an idea might come into my head, and I just might think, oh, I need to go off and try this out and see if it takes me anywhere. So I'm doing these things. Actually, they're related to that turning that you saw, the twisting thing. But I'm going to make them as kind of hanging pieces so they will rotate on their own. You know, it's not motorized, but that kind of idea. So
Nice.
that's
Good.
kind of the latest thing, doing a series
Thank
of
you. Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mark? Or
I have a baseball question.
Yes.
go for it.
Who knows the original name for the Philadelphia Phillies?
Wasn't it the Athletics?
No,
No?
the Athletics were the Athletics.
Ah,
The Phillies, oh my gosh. It's a good question. I should know this, but I don't.
It's kind of what Pennsylvania's based on. The people.
Quakers? The Quakers?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Quakers.
That's great.
no.
Good trivia. And I have my Phillies shirt on, just in hopes we'll see.
Nice. Does anybody else have baseball paraphernalia on? Just a few of us then, huh?
Yeah,
I have a
Um,
small bat of Mark's
yeah.
share.
Hey.
A little tiny guy. This was when he was retiring and was teaching probably his second to the last or the last class, and his office was being cleaned out and drawers and shelves. And one day, you know, class was over by maybe a half an hour, I guess. Some of us were still there. Man, did we clean up?
Well, that's, and then there was a party, retirement party, and I just collected all the demo pieces that I had done over 30 years and put them all out on the table. Everybody, you know, picked a number for sequence, and everybody went through and picked a piece, and then they came back and picked another piece, and they got another piece. So it was fun.
And
So
I got
can
number
you,
one.
can you see
Oh
this
yeah,
one?
look at
Hey.
Meryl.
Is it backwards?
Yeah,
Like,
No,
I
felt the
don't
fish.
know if it's showing correctly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it
right.
is. It is.
That's Meryl's lifetime.
And then I have my award on the back.
No, the whole thing is the award.
Yeah, the whole thing, yes.
That's great.
The one I have of Mark's that I have a baseball bat, and I also have a rolling pin that has a branch coming out of it.
Oh yeah.
People pick it up and go, how do you use that?
See, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Well, that's something we didn't really talk about, Mark, is like this sort of whimsical, but also kind of abusive function.
What?
It's whimsically done, so you don't think of it, but it is really kind of abusing a sense of function in functional objects
How?
that are made to scale, right?
Yeah.
Not quite.
Yes.
Baseball bats, even the one that you did with David Sengel, you can't use it, but it's deceptive.
It could. It would hurt.
Oh, I have
Well,
a question.
You know, the thing is, let me just follow up with that. So the one, this all kind of started for me back in '92. Seriously, I mean, in a big way, with the bats and all this stuff started around then. Because before that, I guess I was doing stuff that was a little on the quirky side. But then '92 came, and there was a little recession, and it kind of like changed everything in terms of sales of furniture in particular. And you know, it's related to that a little bit, but there were just collectors that weren't. It stopped, you know, all of a sudden, and it just, the whole field kind of changed. And I made some pieces that I I refer to as my recessionary expressionism. They were very kind of, they had a little bit of me, but it was mostly simple. And then I made a couple tables and I sent pictures of them to this gallery, and they said, "Oh, that's nice." And that was it. And I'm like, okay, so if nobody's gonna buy stuff, I'm not gonna make stuff to try to appeal to that market. I'm gonna make stuff that appeals to me. And that's when I started doing this other stuff. And, certainly what I do in turning is very different from what most people think of as turning. I could make a straight rolling pin. I've done it. I've made a straight bat. I made 2 straight bats, and then nobody wants them.
I have another question for you.
Yeah.
When are we going to see a croquet set?
I made a croquet mallet. You saw a picture of
I
it.
did. Yes. Yes.
The Center for Furniture Craftsmanship is having an exhibition of croquet mallet and a ball by a bunch of different turners and furniture makers. And I made one for that. Did you figure out what the logo was?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
okay. All right. You seem to be struggling with that.
Well, you taught me before I had my caffeine for the day.
Mark,
Yes.
Andy Buck has a very important question for you.
Uh-oh.
He wants to know if you're trying to grow a ponytail.
Well, I'm not trying. I am. I'm getting there. I'm not going to get my, this is what I'm going after right here. This is 1974, and I'm going back in time. So I go to a barber every 6 weeks, except for the past 4 months. So this is what it comes out. And my hair is pretty. I actually put some gel in it and added it down so it wouldn't look too funny. But yeah, I had it in ponytails, top, sides, back.
I think that's your new headshot.
I don't think I'm ever going to have this opportunity again, right? So I might as well do it now. One last hurrah in the hair department.
That's some pretty impressive volume you had there.
Thank you. That's what I've been working on. There's Rick Cannon. I see him over there.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if I can find enough hair to do that. I can't. How you doing, Mark?
Very well, thank you.
I did send a question, if you let me ask. Have you ever done any offset and hollow turning?
No, I don't do hollow turning. I've never done a hollow turning. I've never done a pen. I've never done, I haven't done those things. There's a lot of things that I haven't done.
I'll send you a couple of pics.
Okay.
They're simple, but I like the way I can bend them.
Cool. Anybody else have a question?
Somebody's birds are pretty vocal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Rick's. I just muted you, Rick, because they were taking over.
Are you in a panic room or something? Where are you?
He's on a swing or something.
No, you.
Me?
Blink
Oh, no.
twice if you need help.
Wait, I gotta show my hair a little more.
Can you get out of that room? Are you okay?
It's locked. Locked. I get out at around 8 a.m.
The family's had enough.
Okay.
I like staying here, Mark.
I'm only a couple miles away if you need it.
Barb, how's the chocolate?
Oh, it's grand. We just opened the other day, like to the door, just come to the door. And people are already complaining, well, if I can't come in, I'm not going to buy anything.
Oh.
So today I went out and I bought a whole bunch of plastic sheeting to cover everything so they can't touch everything.
Mm.
Yeah.
They can tell me what they want. We'll go get it. I mean, and then everything else on the other side of the room is in the showcase. So we should be okay. We'll be up and hopefully jamming by this weekend.
Oh,
Good.
that's good.
Thank you for asking.
Excellent.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's an important, we're all dealing with that, you know, with having all of our businesses and closed, and
Yeah.
now we're all itching to get back. So
Right. You wouldn't think anything happened in New Hope. Last Saturday and Sunday, it was mobbed, and probably 80% of the people on the street weren't wearing masks, but they couldn't go into any of the businesses without one. But you wouldn't even see people carrying them. They were just there for the restaurants and to drink outside. So that was the big thing that opened first. Yeah, so everybody will catch up.
yeah.
How's things down in your part of the city?
Well,
Well, Novice at the center.
Yeah, it looks sunny.
I'm just sitting here in the middle of the street, in the middle of North 3rd Street with my computer and my Zoom. We're doing great. We are. We were able to do this tonight, so we get to do fun things. And the fact that we could have all of you join us without having you needing to travel to Philadelphia is really a plus in many ways. So this is really, we're really kind of having a good time in many ways, and making the best out of, you know, what is largely globally a difficult situation. Thanks for asking. So good to see people from Colorado, from Hawaii, from Norway, from New Hope.
Yeah.
I in one way, that's like I can participate in things that I wouldn't be able to otherwise. It's kind of fascinating. Yeah.
Where are you, Meryl?
I'm in Colorado.
Oh, yeah.
Mark has a brother, don't you, in Denver?
Yes, I do.
But I haven't gotten, well, now we'll never get together, but I'm in that vulnerable age group.
Me too.
How's Lucy?
She's good. She's good.
Say hi.
I will. We have our son living with us too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How'd that happen?
He got a job at Penn as an archivist, and he started on March 16th,
Oh my God.
the day they started going remote and working remotely. So he's been here with us for 3 months.
Oh, well,
That's
that's
been good.
for you. Yeah.
It's been good. We get along. Unlike you and your bad son.
I know.
Meryl has a bad son and a good.
I do.
One of each.
One of each, yeah.
Which one is the one that was here?
The one that was here is the good son.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
She'll travel with him.
Yeah, he came and visited ITE when I was there. We had dinner with Mark, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was fun.
No.
Yeah.
That's so great. Meryl, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming tonight. In your mail earlier today, you wrote about artists kind of, you know, already being accustomed to working in quarantine.
I think, yeah.
How many of the people are in the room tonight are feeling that same feeling of like, well, this is what I do, so just keep doing it?
I do.
Rick, you are nodding in agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here, I
And
got him. Oh yeah, sorry. It's Sharon. I don't have I'm sewing, so I don't have a camera. But yeah, it's the same for us. Nothing's changed for Pat and me, pretty much.
Right.
Okay. So I'll mute again.
oh, thanks, Sharon. I wish we could see you.
I'm in front of a sewing machine. I'm sewing masks. That's how I have pivoted. So we're doing wood and I'm doing masks because everybody wears masks here. So I got really bright, happy fabrics and I've been making masks for about a month. So anyway.
That's That's amazing. Thank you. That's another
Yeah.
one that's makers and during this time pivoting and doing amazing things for communities and applying their creative skills to making face shields and making masks, and it's just amazing, and it makes me so proud to be part of this community during this time. It's really inspiring.
So shall we end on our favorite baseball song?
Yeah,
Yeah.
center
Alright.
field, center field.
All right, all right.
Creedence Clearwater.
Oh, is that
Oh, I was thinking take me out to the ball game, but
No, that's good. Look at Art.
Me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I never get back. Root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame. Or it's 1,
Carol, come
2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
Oh, it's not over. Oh, it's
well, I don't know if you guys want to do the whole thing.
I only know the first verse.
Yeah, that's
there are
fine.
multiple verses?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
What hat do you have on now?
Is that your World Wood Day hat?
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, hey.
Very
No.
cool.
Doesn't everyone have a World Wood Day hat?
Anthony Fortner does.
Sharon has one too.
Can't see her though.
Andy has one.
Yeah, they're pretty big.
Yeah.
You got a big head.
That was fun. We should have been in Tokyo, but it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
It's a drag.
Maybe next year.
Andy, how'd you get your hair cut, Andy Buck?
I had to go. I went to, my wife cut it once, and then I went and I had to like do a special, it just opened the barbershop, and I had to wear my mask and fill out paperwork, and
Oh my gosh.
had a buzz cut yesterday. It's the first haircut in 3 months or something.
Yeah.
Kind of feels good.
I'm gonna get mine cut next year.
I don't think you should. I think you just keep growing. It looks good.
Yeah.
You're trying to look like, George Washington or something.
Yeah.
Or
Well, once it gets into a ponytail, it'll look a lot different, but
it
I'm going for it.
brings out your eyes. I miss you, Mark. I love you.
Yeah, I love you too, Andy.
I think we miss all of you.
Yes.
Yeah. So hopefully soon we can all actually see each other in person, or also stay in touch virtually. This is a nice way to stay connected, and we thank all of you for being a part of the Center's family.
Thanks for doing this. So
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yay, thank you.
Yay.
Yay.
All right, guys.
See you all soon.
Have a good night.
Okay.
Be in
Yay.
touch.
Here.
Lots of fun. Thank you.